individual who's now been arrested in connection to that, and want to put it up here on your screen. So this, again, is just a developing story we're keeping track of right here for you on Live Now from Fox. A suspect in the killing of those students was arrested in eastern Pennsylvania, and law enforcement has been confirming that with our Fox News digital teams. Now, arrest paperwork filed in Monroe County Court said Brian Christopher Koberger, 28 years old, was being held for extradition to Idaho, where he faces a first-degree murder charge. A law enforcement official did confirm the arrest, also with the Associated Press, on condition of anonymity, because obviously they have a lot of work ahead of them still to do, and they said they could not publicly discuss details of the investigation ahead of a formal announcement, which is expected later here on Friday. Now, those 4 students, again, were stabbed to death in a rent.
Okay, so the situation we're in isn't maybe this guy committed the murder. He's been charged, and he's been linked to the crime in a certain way as well. Do you guys know how he's been connected to this crime? I did put a question in the poll, so if you haven't voted there, make sure that you do. Before we get to that, and before we go to that in any more detail, I want to deal with Tracy Walden and what she says about this case. Let's go to that. That's from CBS.
They also say he is a graduate of Washington State University. It's been over a month since the 4 students were killed at a rental house near campus on November 13th. We expect to learn more details during a police news conference at 4 p.m. Eastern time, which, when it starts, we will, of course, bring it to you live. Let's bring in former FBI Special Agent Tracy Walder to talk a bit about this. Tracy, thank you for joining us here. Are you surprised to hear that the suspect was taken into custody so far away from the scene of this crime?
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yes and no, I think, is the correct answer to that question. It looks like he was taken into custody in a rather remote region, the Pocono Mountain region in Pennsylvania. So I'm not surprised that this person was in a remote region, because really what's always sort of confused me about this case is the fact that, you know, people are social, they have cell phones, they have friends that they're talking to, and really we've had no one coming forward even earlier with information. So I would imagine that this person perhaps had 1 or 2 accomplices helping keep him, you know, away from the public eye. But I think I'm not surprised that he was found in a remote region.
So what do you guys say about that? Are you surprised he was found in a remote region? Now, if we actually look on the map where he was found, so let's go to Google Maps, right? If you look at, that's the area that the crime happened, right? Let's just do that, make it a bit smaller. So that's the area where the crime happened. You can see Moscow is very close to the border with Washington, right? So we put it out like that. It's pretty much on the border with Washington. That's Idaho over there, Washington over there. Now let's have a look at how far away the perpetrator was actually found. So let's put in Pocono. Really, it's like right on the other side of the country, right? 37 hours drive, and one does wonder, how did he get there? Did he go by vehicle? Did he fly there? But he's really right on the other side of the country, right, in Pennsylvania. And I don't know about you guys, but doesn't this remind you a little bit about the Caitlin Armstrong case? Because Caitlin Armstrong was in Texas, right? And she ended up also in this area, and then of course went all the way down to this sort of area, right? But it does make you wonder, did he do this drive almost in the same way that Brian Laundrie also did a drive, right? Do you think that is what happened? Do you think he drove there, or do you think he flew there? Do you think he was traced, or do you think he was found due to them finding the vehicle? Or do you think that it was found by some other means? What do you guys think? So sorry that I haven't greeted you all. I must say it's really weird having my face between 3 versions of his face, and not very clear at all. Maybe I should put on a beanie. is somewhere where I am, but that might be a bit better. Okay. Anne says the vehicle. A couple of you say that he drove there. It does look like he drove there. And with regard to that, I want to bring up some really interesting information sent to me by SM Kobylinski. Have a look at this. And this comes from CNN. Let's put it up. Can you guys see that? It says authorities narrowed their focus, and that's something that I said was necessary. If you're going to find a perpetrator, you need to start narrowing it down. They narrowed their focus to suspect Brian Koberger in connection with the blah, 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 after tracing his ownership of the white Hyundai Elantra seen in the area of the homicides. So that's literally how they solved the case. It seems like they were able to trace the vehicle to the crime scene and then trace Brian Koberger to the vehicle. And then Brian tried to get himself in the vehicle, I guess, far from the crime. And did that really work? And I have been saying in my analysis lately, it's one thing for a person to disappear. It's not so easy for a vehicle to disappear. And surely, you know, one of the areas we were going into in the previous live was looking for vehicles in the Moscow, Idaho campus parking database, right? Well, wouldn't the next step be to go to the very next, the neighboring university, Pullman University parking database, campus university parking database? And isn't that how they actually found him? Right. Also, it could have just been any student. They could have said, hey, I know someone here who drives an Elantra, and maybe they had that clue all along. So it looks like they traced the ownership of that vehicle. And do you remember there was kind of a debate where people said the fact that they're looking for this vehicle doesn't necessarily mean they're looking for the killer. And I was like, no, I think it does mean they're looking for the killer. And that is how it turned out. So that's the first part. The other part is the DNA. They say his ownership of the white Hyundai seen in the area places him at the crime. And then also Kohlberger's DNA has also been matched to DNA recovered at the scene of the deaths, according to the sources. And that was the other thing we said, that it is virtually impossible to commit a crime like this, which is a very physical crime. It's a very personal crime. It's a crime where you are physically very present, and because it's times 4, you're physically present times 4 times. It is very likely that you would leave your own DNA there. It could even be clothing fibers, but the chance that he injured himself, I think, is why there's DNA. There's not just touch DNA, it's very likely blood DNA. Now, what's quite weird and quite fascinating and quite troubling is that this guy appears to have been a crime buff. He was studying for a doctorate in criminology. And so you kind of get the idea that he was trying to cover for himself. You know, in other words, he premeditated this crime, but he had a good idea of how to get away with it. So it does make you wonder, did he dress in a particular way? Did he clean up after himself? That seems now very, very likely. Do you guys agree? Doesn't it seem very likely? He was studying criminology, that he very likely spent some time trying to clean up after himself, right? I've pushed H says Ethan likely came out of the room when he came down the stairs. Well, bear in mind that house creaked, the stairs creaked, all the floors creaked, so likely someone did hear something. We know 2 of them had defensive wounds. That's quite a funny comment. So let's have a look at what you guys have been saying. See if what the poll is saying, if I can kind of get there. So let me ask you guys, how many of you were still thinking about one or the other of the jacks? How many of you were still like absolutely certain that it was one or the other of the jacks when this announcement came out, right? So the Humble Grower says the motive. Well, we first want to find out a bit more about the who. We want to find out who he is, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is exactly what we said, emasculated and entitled. So if you think about a guy who's studying to be a doctor in his field, that is quite a prestigious, privileged position to be in compared to the rest of the university fraternity. But, you know, I think the mistake that many of us made was we assumed that the person who felt emasculated was a younger person. In other words, a young ex-boyfriend or something like that, not actually an older person, not someone who was older than a lot of the other students, and probably felt humiliated because he was not allowed to be part of this younger group. Does that make sense? So it's still emasculated and entitled. Do you guys agree with that? So just in terms of that whole idea, if you were fixated on one of the jacks, how does that make you feel now, based on what we were talking about, the scout mindset? Keep an open mind, be curious, and don't go into a soldier mindset. Because if you did think it was Jack, whomever, then every single YouTube video you went into, you would have been trying to either defend that idea or present that idea. And on a lot of my videos, I just got the same name over and over again. Case closed, it's this person, right? And didn't you guys find there was a very funny moment where the news had come out that there'd been an arrest, but we didn't know what the name was. And you had that weird situation where law enforcement were one step ahead of social media. Doesn't it always feel like social media is 1,000 light years ahead of law enforcement? It feels like that, but is it really like that? Just because social media are chattering all the time, does it really mean we know what's going on? Law enforcement are actually doing the hard yards. They're doing the hard boots on the ground work. But there was this funny moment where we knew that someone had been arrested. There was a moment where someone said he was 25 years old. One mainstream media outlet said he was 25. Then we found out he was 28. And then you kind of got the feeling we're going to know his name any moment now. And a certain YouTuber came out and gave a name that turned out to be the wrong name. And that video was then scrubbed. By the way, saying something like that, this person's the killer, that is absolutely how you get a defamation thing against you, right? You've got a very strong feeling it could be someone and everyone wants to know, and then you accuse someone falsely, right? So that was taken offline pretty quickly, but there's this really interesting window where we we knew someone had been arrested, but we didn't know his name or his face, but law enforcement did. And so it was that weird place where you kind of felt, yeah, law enforcement have actually known all along what has been going on. And we've kind of assumed maybe until like yesterday or the day before. I mean, I was actually going to put up a video, 20,000 tips and no suspect, question mark, right? And it turns out that it wasn't 20,000 tips and no suspect. There was a suspect and they've been following him all along, right? Bria, good to see you here. So if we go to the poll, let's see what you guys are saying. How were they able to catch Brian Koberger? Anonymous tip, 17%. Probably that was part of it. The Elantra led Ali to him. That probably also was part of it. But basically, the main reason was the Elantra and DNA, 53%. There could have been a cell phone ping as well, but the main answer is the Elantra and DNA. So I want to show you guys Brian Enton has put up some information showing the cleanup crew on site. Let's put that up. So this went up just a couple of minutes ago. Now, I'm not sure what the point of that is. I'm not sure if it's to prevent the media from seeing anything or if it's to prevent contamination. Somehow I think it's the former. What do you guys think? Kind of get the idea they want to go in and come out without having to worry about cameras, seeing what is going on. You can also imagine if they're cleaning up things like blood evidence, rags and so on, they don't really want that to be photographed, right? You can kind of understand that. Thanks a lot, Francis. Thank you. Spending quite a long time putting that in place. So it turns out that there was a reason the cops felt comfortable releasing the crime scene today, right? You felt like they knew they were going to be in this position right now. And we are going to listen into the press conference. I think it's in about 5 minutes' time. I hope I managed to catch that so I can share it with you guys. What else can I show you? So this was a press conference from, sorry, not a press conference. This was a news report from ABC News.
Into that vicious stabbing murders of those 4 college students in Idaho. Police now bringing in a special cleaning crew to the crime scene as we're seeing new body cam video of one of the victims talking to police just weeks before. Kana Whitworth is back there in Idaho with the new details. Kana, good morning to you. Police just this week pleading with the public for more help.
That's exactly right, Janae. Authorities saying that they're actually receiving new tips this week from across the nation. This as new video has surfaced of police officers responding to a noise complaint at that popular off-campus home that this morning is still a crime scene.
So do you guys think that there was a connection between Brian, the killer, and the victims? Do you think this is random, that he was trying in some sick way to perhaps try to commit the perfect murder? Do you think it was random? Do you think he's a random individual? Or do you think that he was connected in some way? What do you guys think? That was going to be my other poll question. So let me see what you guys say. Miami says random. Missy says not random. Songbird says a connection. Stephanie says, I think there is a connection. I also think there's a connection. I mean, there obviously is a connection in the sense that this guy's also a student, right? I mean, that should tell you. This guy's studying his doctorate in criminology at a neighboring university. And I think that's also, in a way, a little bit of a feather in our cap here at True Crime Rocket Science, because one of the things we were talking about in just the previous video, the last video before this guy was arrested, we were trying to think, is there some other way that the victims could have come in contact with the perpetrator besides him simply going to the house to have parties? And so one of the ideas was, well, didn't this football game bring this guy into town? And we still don't know that. We don't know whether the football game did bring him into town. We don't know whether he was in town anyway that day or whether he was aggravated on some other day. That's actually quite an interesting point as well. But there definitely is a connection. The connection is he's a student and they are students. And I really do think that he did at some point go into the house, that he was at one of the parties at some point, and probably at a certain point, either because they thought he was too old or too creepy or whatever it was, wasn't allowed back. And he seems, don't you get the idea that he does seem to be the kind of guy to get fixated or obsessed about something? Don't you get that sense about him? And that he got fixated or obsessed, possibly with Madison, possibly with Kaylee, possibly with both of them, possibly with that house, and wanting to be part of the goings on there, right? And so, yeah, it does look like he coveted them from afar. The other thing that we've known all along was that this was a very brazen crime. Wasn't it brazen because he thought he could get away with it? He thought, first of all, if I just cross the border, I can get away with this. You know, they're never going to suspect someone from somewhere else. And in a way that was half right. They're going to suspect someone in that student community. And isn't that exactly what we did? And that was the logical inference to draw in the beginning. I think what he didn't count on was CCTV. I think what he didn't count on was also the reality of committing a crime. Try not to leave your DNA behind. With a knife crime, easier said than done. Ken says, Debbie says, I did hear his sister lived near there and knew Xana. Okay. Actually, that's not the case here. It's not really the case of innocent until proven guilty. They found his DNA at the scene, and they've traced the Yande. Now finding the DNA is huge. So technically, you're right. It is innocent until proven guilty. At this stage where he's been arrested and they're about to announce why, technically you're right, but it's a little bit different in this case. It's there's obviously some proof that is putting us where we are right now. So let's see if that press conference is on. Am I going to be able to find it now?
has his initial appearance in Idaho court. I want to express my appreciation to our local community, the people of Idaho, and those throughout our nation who provided information to help us investigate these murders has been very impressive. We've received over 19,000 tips, and we've conducted over 300 interviews. To recap this case, on the evening of November 12th, Kaylee and Madison arrived home at about 1:56 a.m. after visiting a local bar and street food vendor. Ethan and Xana were at the Sigma Chi house before arriving home around 1:45 a.m. The two surviving roommates had also been in the community but returned around 1 a.m. On the morning of November 13th, a 911 call was made at 11:58 a.m., reporting an unconscious person at the residence. The call came from inside the home from one of the surviving roommates' cell phones. Moscow police responded and found 2 victims on the 2nd floor and 2 victims on the 3rd floor. On November 17th, autopsies were conducted, and the Latah County coroner confirmed the identity of the 4 victims. The cause and manner of death was homicide by stabbing. Some had defensive wounds, and each had been stabbed multiple times. These murders have shaken our community, and no arrest will ever bring back these young students. However, we do believe justice will be found through the criminal process. This was a very complex and extensive case. We developed a clear picture over time, and we stand assured that the work is not done, but be assured the work is not done. This has just started. Since November, we have remained laser focused on pursuing every lead in our pursuit of justice for the victims and their families. I recognize the frustration with the lack of information that's been released. However, providing any details in this criminal investigation might have tainted the upcoming criminal prosecution or alerted the suspect of our progress. We will continue to provide as much information as we can as the process moves forward. Today, I want to specifically thank our dedicated Moscow Police Department detectives, patrol officers, the Idaho State detectives, the Idaho State troopers, and their crime lab technicians and scientists, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation for the resources and personnel to conduct this massive investigation. It was the dedication of them and the persistence and the numerous hours that led to an arrest. Fortunately, these highly skilled people worked together as a cohesive team to solve this case. I also want to thank our community and the nation. Over the past 6 weeks, I've been continually reminded of how much our community cares. Locally, public support has been exceptional with kind words, food for investigators, and letters of support. You will never know how much your words of encouragement help us through these trying times. I appreciate each of you and each of your kindness. Agencies and individuals from across the nation have reached out to us to express their support to this department. I'm reminded how our Moscow community, our families, and the nation has been impacted by this daily. Finally, I do want to thank our media partners for the help. You kept this in the news. You helped us with tips. You kept things going, and we truly appreciate that. And you are the product of those 19,000 tips that we received, which is an impressive number. I would like to invite Bill Thompson, the county prosecutor, up at this time.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is Bill Thompson. I'm the Latah County prosecutor. And it's sad to be here, but happy to be here at the same time. As Chief Fry indicated, a criminal complaint was filed yesterday here in Latah County, charging the defendant, Mr. Kohlberger, with 4 counts of first-degree murder, in addition to felony burglary, which involves entering the residence with the intent to commit the crime of murder. Mr. Kohlberger, and let me preface, there's a pending case now in court, and I and my office and the investigators have to live with the restrictions that our Supreme Court places on pretrial publicity. That said, I promise you we will share with you through the court process or otherwise whatever we are allowed to. I just appreciate your patience on that. The factual basis for the charges are summarized in what's called a probable cause affidavit that is on file with the court. According to the rules of the Idaho Supreme Court, that is sealed until Mr. Kohlberger is physically back in Latah County and has been served with the Idaho arrest warrant. At that time, we expect that that affidavit will be available to you so you can share the true facts with all of your readers and your watchers and your listeners and all of the people who are interested and really need to know what's going on. So please have patience with us on that. We hope to get that to you as soon as we can. As far as Mr. Kohlberger, I can share with you that he is a graduate student at Washington State University and has an apartment residence over in Pullman. He has had an initial appearance in front of a judge in Pennsylvania. He is being held without bond, and the warrant from our magistrate judge here also provides for no bond. We understand that he's scheduled to be back in court in Pennsylvania next Tuesday afternoon, and that a public defender has been appointed for him there. The process at this point is, since he was arrested in another state, he has the opportunity to either waive extradition and return voluntarily to the state of Idaho, or if he prefers not to waive extradition, then we will initiate extradition proceedings through our governor's office. if we do that, it can take a while for him to get here. So again, I'm asking for your patience and understand that's just the way the system works. Once he gets here, he'll have an initial appearance with our magistrate. They'll deal with issues such as making sure competent counsel is representing him, and the case will be scheduled for further hearings. Your primary source of factual information is going to be the court record, because that's what the Supreme Court says we need to refer you to. So please pay attention to what's going on in court and have people there to watch and hear what's being said. As an attorney, myself and my office, we are limited on what we are allowed by the courts to say outside of the courtroom. So please just work with us. Finally, as the chief indicated, this is not the end of this investigation. In fact, this is a new beginning. Y'all now know the name of the person who has been charged with these offenses. Please get that information out there. Please ask the public, anyone who knows about this individual, to come forward, call the tip line, report anything you know about him to help the investigators and eventually our office and the court system understand fully everything there is to know about not only the individual, but what happened and why. Next, I'll introduce Colonel Ked Wells from the Idaho State Police. Thank you.
What happened and why?
Well, good afternoon. My name is Kedrick Wills. I serve as the director of the Idaho State Police and certainly want to express our appreciation for your attendance here today. These tragic murders took 4 young, vibrant lives from our community. Nothing we do can bring them back. The only thing that we can do in law enforcement to honor their memories that we know of is to bring this to a successful conclusion. This has been a very difficult time for the families, the university, the community, and the state of Idaho. However, it is also proven that communities come together in tough times. Certainly appreciate the support of the local community and our national audience that has been following us as our investigators have worked through this case. I'm thankful also to you, the media partners, who have helped keep this case in the forefront that generates the tips and we hope will continue to generate information that will help us to a conclusion of this proceeding. I'd like to express our appreciation on behalf of the Idaho State Police to Chief Fry, his leadership, and the entire Moscow Police Department for the way that they handled this from the very beginning. He directed the right people to the right positions that led us to this conclusion today. I've had the utmost confidence in this investigation and in Chief Fry, as well as in Mr. Bill Thompson and the Latah County Prosecutor's Office, who've been a great partner throughout this. Nothing has deterred the commitment of the investigators who've worked on this case, regardless of the organization they represent. It's been very trying and very difficult, as you know, that it has been on those investigators as they do the tedious work that they're so good at doing. The partnerships is what's led here as well. The partnerships between Moscow Police Department, I'd like to express our appreciation with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, specifically the special agent in charge out of the Salt Lake City Division, Dennis Rice, and also the work that happened in the last 24 hours in Pennsylvania with the arrest with the Pennsylvania State Police and Colonel Evanchik with the Pennsylvania State Police. We appreciate what they've done across the nation to help us as well. As Bill shared, this investigation is far from over. In fact, I appreciate what he shared, that this is not an ending, but rather a new beginning. The difference now is, as he shared, that we are dictated what information we can share by the court process and by laws in our state of Idaho. And so we will share, as he shared, Mr. Thompson is absolutely committed to share everything he can share through the court process. We've got to make sure that we don't get in front of that process. And we really deeply appreciate everybody's support here. The relationships that were forged here and the partnerships that were forged have led to this. And based on that is why we're here today. And we continue to believe that the best way we can honor these 4 lives that have been taken is to make sure that we have a successful outcome here. One of the partnerships that's been forged throughout this is a partnership with the University of Idaho. And on that, I'd like to introduce the president of the University of Idaho, Mr. Scott Green. Thank you. Good afternoon. Scott Green, President, University of Idaho. Today's news of arrest is a welcome one. It's relief to our university, our community, and our extended Vandal family. The outpouring of support over the past 6 weeks helped sustain us during the most trying time. It provided the strength that helped us navigate the international scrutiny visited on our students and employees. We are truly thankful for the compassion and acts of kindness shown to our community. Kindness is contagious, and it provided the light that reclaimed ground lost to evil and darkness. We first want to acknowledge and thank Governor Little for the early promise of financial support that enabled the university to secure our campus and focus on helping our students and our employees in the wake of the crimes. We also appreciate the Idaho State Police and the highly visible security presence that brought comfort and calm to a community shocked and confused by the senseless crimes. We never lost faith that this case would be solved and are grateful for the hard work of the Moscow Police Department and their law enforcement partners. Vast and committed FBI resources brought important expertise to this complex case. Across the board, dedicated, highly competent personnel worked this case to arrest. This crime has nevertheless left a mark on our university, our community, and our state. While we cannot bring back Maddie, Kaylee, Zaina, and Ethan, we can thoughtfully and purposefully carry their legacy forward in the work that we do. Our students come first, and that was proven each and every day of this investigation. We are committed to safely delivering the college town atmosphere, campus experience, and high-touch quality education for which the University of Idaho is known. With time, we will heal. We will move forward together, and we will remain Vandal strong. With that, I'd like to turn it back over to Chief Fry.
So now we will open the floor to questions. However, I want to remind everyone, as Prosecutor Bill Thompson explained, any factual information regarding the arrest of Kohlberger is currently sealed per Idaho law and will not be released until he has appeared in an Idaho court. Please formulate your questions accordingly. I recognize there are a lot of questions, and I will try to answer as many of them as I can.
Here they're restricted from sharing facts. I mean, that already puts law enforcement kind of in a box. Anyway, let's listen in.
Lauren Patterson, Northwest Public Broadcasting, Spokane Public Radio. I realize the records are sealed. I guess I'm not too familiar with how it works, but can you tell us what tip, what lead, what piece of evidence really led you all the way from Idaho to the suspect in Pennsylvania?
As I've said in the past, that's part of our investigation, and we won't be releasing that this time. We will have those answers. We'll have them as soon as we can make those available to you.
Then a quick follow-up and a two-parter. Is our community safe, or is law enforcement still on the search for other suspects who might be involved in this attack?
What I can tell you is we have an individual in custody who committed these horrible crimes, and I do believe our community is safe, but we still need to be vigilant, right? We still have talked about this in the past. We always need to be aware of our surroundings and make sure that we're aware of what's going on.
Hi, Chief. How soon into the investigation did police and law enforcement begin to spot Mr. Kohlberger as a potential suspect? And a follow-up, how many tips, if you can say, were specifically related to Mr. Kohlberger?
Good follow-up.
To the tip part, honestly, I can't answer that question, so I'm not even going to speculate on that. On the other part, that's part of our investigation, and it will come out. I'd like the mic to please come right over here.
Thank you. Dana Griffin with NBC News. Can you confirm that Kohlberger asked whether or not anyone else had been arrested when he was in custody?
I cannot confirm that, or I'm not sure of that information, but that would still be a part of our investigation.
Did CODIS initially return any hits on this guy?
That's still part of our investigation. That will come out. If we could get somebody over here, please.
And then one final question. Is there any message to the online sleuths who slandered and harassed people who they believed were responsible?
There was a lot of speculation going on, and we've always said from the very beginning that we're the official message that comes out, and to pay attention to what we're putting out there to the press.
I'm Nancy Liu with News Nation, and we were over at the house this morning, and you told us that the remediation would begin today. It was suddenly stopped. Can you tell us why?
Yes. The house cleanup has been halted, and that came by a legal request from the court.
Christina Corbin, Fox News. Chief, have you?
So that's quite interesting. They stopped cleaning the house due to a request from the court.
You identified a motive?
That is part of the investigation, and that will come out as we continue the investigation. But what we still ask is for people to continually send us things in the tip line. We are still looking for more information. We're still trying to build that picture, just like we have stated all along. We're putting all the pieces together, and that will help.
Do you think that they know the motive at this point? Do you guys think that law enforcement know what the motive is? Now, bear in mind, you only know what the motive is when you know who the who is. You know a lot about the who. So do you think that they know what the motive is?
Chief Veronica Miracle with CNN. Any indication that the suspect knew the victims?
That's part of the investigation as well. It won't be something that will come out at this point in time, but as we continue the investigation and as this case goes to trial, that will be brought forth.
Have you spoken?
Another good question. It must be very frustrating for the media. I mean, you can virtually not ask any question and get an answer. So really the only kind of questions you can ask are, how do you feel about this? And certain things that are factual, like when is the next appearance likely to be? It's very, very difficult as a reporter to ask a question given the strictness of the answers.
Spoken to the families? Can you tell us what they've told you today?
Are you talking the victims' families? Yeah, we have reached out to the victim's family as we always do. We've done that daily, and we've continued to have contact with them.
Hey, Nate Sanford, you mentioned earlier that you're still seeking tips about Brian and that people should still share whatever information they have. Can you speak at all about what specifically people should be reaching out for, like if they know something?
I would say anything and everything. As we've said all along, we know what tips we're looking for. We will take those tips and we will have professionals look at those and decide which pieces of those we need to use for our case. So we ask that everybody would do that.
Angela Palermo, Idaho Statesman. Your department and other investigators on the case took a lot of flack for keeping information close to your chest. Are you glad that you did that? And were you worried about tipping the suspect off?
I will 100% stand behind the way that we handled this investigation. And this all started from day one with our patrol officers arriving on scene, locking down the scene, us calling in the Idaho State Police, us calling in the FBI, and keeping information that was pertinent to this case very, very tight. We want to have.
If you think about it, this is kind of a surprise. There's kind of a sense that this is kind of a small police department. Is this case going to go cold? And you kind of got a sense of how confident can we really be in this small department's work. And then not only that, also they've got an army of 60 agents, right? And because they were so, and bear in mind, there's a lot of pressure on them, they didn't yield to that pressure and then give things away. They actually stuck to their guns and I think have done a phenomenal job in both doing their jobs, but also handling the media in a way that wouldn't end up being a trial by media. You can imagine someone who's in a criminal, studying in the criminal justice field, that would be something that would occur to him. What is my defense here? Well, couldn't I argue trial by media? Well, can he? His name's only just come up now. So very well handled.
Have a situation where when this goes to trial, there is no doubt that we've done everything right and we've slowed down and we've continued to slow down. We'll continue to do that.
Hey, Chief. Have you guys found the murder weapon or the Hyundai Elantra?
So we are still looking for all pieces of evidence, but we are still looking for the weapon. And I will say that we have found an Elantra.
Well, that is unexpected. I thought he was going to say that's part of the investigation. So they haven't found the murder weapon. They did find the Elantra. So that's obviously how that kind of answers the previous question. How did they find the killer? Well, they found the Elantra, right?
Stephanie Becker with CNN. Can you tell what it was like when you got the phone call when the police told you that they had your suspect?
I can tell you, for a lot of law enforcement, it was a fairly sleepless couple of days with as we were leading up to everything that we were doing. But what I can tell you is I have faith in those agencies across the nation. I have faith in our officers. I have faith in the FBI, and they did a great job. But sure, there was some times, even throughout the day, that we were always concerned.
Hi, Chief. Danya back at CBS News. Can you talk a little bit more about the suspect's connection to Pennsylvania?
All I know is that he lives in Pennsylvania.
Oh, he lives in
Chief Guy
Pennsylvania.
Tannenbaum from Nonstop Local KHQ in Spokane. More about the Elantra. We saw reports that you mentioned that you recovered an Elantra, but can you specify where that was found? And we know that that was one of the biggest pieces of information you were asking from the public to tip. Were you able to provide an information on whether those tips led to this seizure of an Elantra?
That's still part of the investigation that will come out in the future.
Chief Glenn Mosley, Idaho Public Radio here in Moscow. The additional police presence in town and on campus, semester's coming. Is that going to continue?
You will continue to see state troopers in the area. You know, we're talking to Latah County as well. You will see a presence of us that we're always have up on campus. We have assigned officers to that. So you will continue to see a law enforcement presence. I'm going to take two more questions.
Hi, Chief. Julie Scott, ABC News. Can you tell us if you eventually had a license plate number to the Elantra and how you tracked it to Pullman?
That's still part of the investigation that will come out.
Chief, hi, Matt Lovelace with the Murrow College of Communication. I want to ask about Mr. Koberger as a graduate student at WSU. Are you aware of if he returned to campus after November 13th? And have you had any communication with departments on the WSU campus about his attendance?
So some of that is going to be followed up as we continue our investigation. We'll be asking some of those questions, but that'll come out in the near future. So what I do want to do is I want to thank you all. You really have been the national voice for us. You've given us the opportunity to get many, many tips. And I do appreciate everything you've done, and we'll continue to look forward to working with you in the future on this. So I'd like to thank you for that, and thank you for your time.
Okay, so that's it. I must say a lot more information came out of that than I expected. Often you see channels covering these press conferences, and it's almost like there's this expectation always that you're going to have this huge revelation, and it almost never is, because it's always the same thing. Cops have got to follow protocol. The only time you really get these huge revelations is when, for example, the probable cause affidavit comes out, and that may happen within the next week or so, maybe longer. And also when a case is actually playing out in trial, information becomes public as that is happening. So you very seldom, prior to, when someone has just been caught, you have a big press conference, but it's very, very seldom that you get any really useful information out of that. We got a little bit out of this one, that the perpetrator lives in Pennsylvania, that they have his car, right? That they found the Elantra. So that was definitely quite interesting. Another thing that's kind of interesting is this idea of, when we were thinking about a knife killer, I think we were thinking, is this a hunter? Is this a soldier? Is this a someone who may have worked in a butchery? We were kind of thinking of those. But another aspect to that, and obviously we know this in hindsight, is someone who is kind of in law enforcement, in the sense of someone who's very aware of crime, is probably going to be confronted at some stage with the idea of, what weapon should I get? A weapon? Should I have a weapon to defend myself? I've thought about that myself. Haven't you guys? Like, if you're constantly aware of crime, constantly studying crime, you tend to think, I should probably get some sort of security, right? And it might be security cameras, which I recommend. It might be a gun. And we heard that the residents of Moscow were starting to want, I think, handguns and training for Christmas, right? But if you think about this perpetrator, he was studying, I think, criminal law. And within that scenario, he bought himself a knife, probably originally for his personal safety, probably as a way of walking around with a concealed weapon in case somebody attacked him, right? Do you agree with that? That he originally bought that knife? We don't know this for sure, but didn't he originally buy that knife as a result of studying the law and studying crime, thinking, I don't want to be a victim of crime, so I'm going to have this as a potential defensive weapon, right? Just an interesting thought. A couple of other thoughts I want to share with you. If you think about this idea of, would the community have been safe? So if law enforcement knew this guy's identity early on, right? Which it's difficult to say when they did know his identity, but they knew about the Elantra on day one. And they said something like, Timmy, I'm going to have to put you down. I'm really getting hot. So we know that they knew about the Elantra on day one, right? They'd gotten the CCTV from Linda Lane on the first day. And I really don't think it really would have taken that long to find the vehicle. You would have started with the student databases, parking databases, and then gone to the next university. And in theory, they may have known who he was within the first week. And do you remember they actually said there's no threat to the community? And then later on, they said, what did they say? They sort of walked that back. I think they said there's no threat to the community because they knew that he wasn't in the community, and also that he'd left that community. Does that make sense? And so I think them saying that was a kind of admission that they did actually know who he was and that where he was from, but they were still trying to get some information. Now, if you think about the timing of this, they just released the house, and we just passed the 6-week mark, which is how long it takes for DNA and forensic evidence to come back. And I do think they were playing a mind game with this guy, obviously, because he's studying in the criminal field. I think they were playing mind games with him. So I think there's a point where they said, we don't know where he is. That was the one thing they said somewhere along the line. And the other thing is, I think when they said they're looking for 22,000 registered Elantras, I think that was a way of saying to him, we're not closing in on you, if that makes sense. In other words, they're saying to the folks in Moscow, we're looking for this vehicle, but then they also add, well, we're looking for 22,000 of these vehicles. The reality is trying to find a vehicle is not that hard. It's very, very hard to hide a vehicle away. If a vehicle hasn't gone off a ravine, it's very, very hard because vehicles have to stay in certain public areas, public roadways, driveways, parking lots, and there are cameras all over the place. So it's very, very hard to hide a vehicle away. And I'm not surprised that that's how they found him, through the vehicle. The other thing that I think they were being a little bit cagey with was that, remember they said, we're looking for someone who was the driver or occupant of the vehicle. You've got some crucial information. You may have witnessed something. They weren't saying, we're looking for the driver of this vehicle because we know you're the killer. They didn't say that. But obviously, what do you think they were thinking, right? It is interesting what the one reporter asked, where she said, is it true that when he was taken into custody, he said, has anyone else been arrested? I thought that was definitely quite interesting. I think it is almost a way of saying, I'm not on the run. I'm not running away from the law. I've got no idea what's going on, right? And I think if they've seized his phone and seized his computer, it'll be clear what he's been looking at, what he's been obsessively studying while he's been on the run. Another thing that is quite interesting is just prior to this, I actually wrote on my pad, I think I've got it, I can actually show it to you guys here. I don't know if you guys can see that. Can you guys see Caitlin written over there? And I just thought, because I was starting to go into intertextual aspects, we went into the Amanda Knox case. I wanted to go into the contamination aspect in the John Benet Ramsey case and kind of ask, was this deliberately contaminated? And then in intertextual, in an intertextual sense, I just started thinking about the Caitlin Armstrong case, and I thought, if you think about that case, now obviously it's not, we don't know exactly what happened there, and it's innocent until proven guilty, but what appears could have happened there, what people have been speculating is that it's a love triangle case where someone thought that her boyfriend was cheating on another girl, and the girlfriend was so upset by this, allegedly within the scenario, that she went straight to the house and shot the victim 3 times in the chest. And then the whole thing surrounding that is, was this person angry? Was this person insecure? And whether or not what I've just told you is true, the situation is almost like an emasculated female, a female that has been undermined in a relationship, a female who wants to have a serious relationship with a guy, and somebody else potentially threatens that. And how does she feel? Does she feel angry? Does she feel insecure? Does she feel activated to do something about that, right? Now, doesn't it feel like, and I'm not saying that is what happened in the Caitlin Armstrong case, I'm saying that's a scenario that has been mentioned. But if you take that scenario, doesn't that scenario feel like a match in this case? That someone felt emasculated and entitled, but within a scenario, they thought they were in a relationship with someone, or they thought something was happening, only to realize that it wasn't, and this made that person really, really upset, right? And so that is exactly the question. Was he rejected by any of them? I do think he was connected in some way. Now, I don't know if you remember in my previous analysis, I kind of mentioned a scenario where I said, people are thinking about and it's important to be aware of that dynamic, but people were thinking about the dynamic in terms of Jack saying, oh, well, they'd broken up 3 weeks ago. And I think the video I put up on that, I think it's been viewed 100,000 times or something, which is to say it is very significant. The fact that Kaylee had broken up with Jack 3 weeks earlier, I think that is very significant. But the other side of that, so in the same way you might say, jeepers, she broke up with Jack 3 weeks ago. Jack must be really upset about that. And I'm sure he was, right? But the flip side of that is somebody else may have an expectation that she's now available and ... Do you follow my meaning? It's not just Jack who's in a situation of uncertainty because of this decision. It's also someone else who's wanted to get his foot in the door, potentially. Jessica Cross says, let's have a look. An early news report stated that there was a vehicle of interest with a parking sticker that was not a University of Idaho parking sticker. That's interesting. If that's true, I didn't catch that. So that is definitely interesting. I mean, you would imagine that that vehicle does have a Washington State University parking sticker on it. Are there any of you here who've been to university? I'm sure quite a few have. I'm someone who was at university, and that is kind of a regular thing. You put a sticker on your windscreen, and then that allows you to sort of come and go without being stopped all that often for sort of security or whatever. Sometimes you have the sticker on your windscreen and they stop you anyway. But it's very common, I guess, at universities around the world that just allows your vehicle access, right? And so it is interesting if they found if they've got some other CCTV footage and that actually showed a sticker. Maybe they couldn't get the license plate, but they did get the sticker. That would have gotten them in the right direction, like lippity quick, right? Lippity, what? Lippity, can't think of the word now. Yeah, so I also told you guys about a situation I was in when I was overseas, where there was a girl I kind of had a crush on. I was in my late 20s, I think. She was probably mid 20s. And she told me that she was from Australia. She told me she had a boyfriend in Australia. That's why she was sort of not available. And then the next thing I saw her making out with this dude. And then her friend explained to me, yeah, but it's not serious or something like that. And I was like, but anyway, and I think that is the situation that happened to this guy, is that he had designs on one of the girls. And think about both the girls. Both of them were technically in relationships right through their college years, technically. Madison was in a relationship with Jake, technically. And Kaylee was in a relationship with Jack, technically, although less so. And so you do have to wonder, why did Kaylee break up with Jack? Was it to make room for someone else? Did she say to him, well, if this guy, Brian, if Brian was interested in Kaylee, did Brian think that Kaylee was going to be part of his life, that Kaylee was going to, that they were going to have a happily ever after? And then when he found out that she was going to wherever, overseas, backpacking, and then to Texas, was that the straw that broke the camel's back? Also, I told Adam everything about who, about what, right? It does make you wonder. Sharon says the sister is a critical care trauma nurse. Yeah, is apparently a fraternity member in the past. Now, another thing that comes up that's quite interesting is we were talking about this idea of, could the fraternity be protecting someone, right? Now, if you think about this guy, he's kind of in a lecturer position. The way I understood it, because he was studying for his PhD, he was actually giving classes to other kids. So how comfortable would kids be to say, I think my lecturer is the killer, when that could get them into trouble in a sense, right? I suppose it's a bit of a long shot to say that because they could do it anonymously, but I'm just saying, in a scenario where you say, was someone keeping secrets for him? He's not within a fraternity per se, but I suppose maybe he is. Certainly an interesting line of sort of thought. So I wrote this down here in terms of a pact of silence. If you think it might be your lecturer, could you or would you say so? If you were a student at university and you knew your lecturer drove an Elantra, would you say so? Or would there be a little bit of concern that if you did say so and you were wrong, what would happen to your grades? If you did say so and you were wrong, how would that person treat you? The other thing, this is a little bit of a silly comment, but didn't you think that the prosecutor looks a bit like Santa Claus with that big beard? Something else that's not really worth mentioning, but I suppose I'll mention it anyway. You notice he's also being accused of felony burglary, breaking in, but presumably not via forced entry. So what I think that shows is that he wasn't let in. He wasn't. It wasn't as though he was there as a guest of Ethan or Xana, or that he was hanging out with the survivors or something. He literally did break in, but not through forced entry. And that does suggest that he'd been there before and he knew the code to get in there. I suppose it's also possible he may have gotten the code from somebody else. I think that's a little bit less likely, but certainly possible. As a someone who's a veteran of the university circuit, it's possible that he got that code through the grapevine, maybe all the kids sharing the code. I suppose that's possible. What else? We didn't learn anything new about the autopsy. We didn't learn anything new about, that was on the November 17th. We didn't learn anything new about the stabbing wounds. All 4 victims were stabbed, all 4 stabbed in the chest, all 4 had multiple stab wounds, and then 2 had defensive wounds. So in terms of the scout mindset, and this is really, I think, important to do a little bit of having a report card for our channel where we say, how well did we do? You know, one reporter said, you know, social media really didn't behave very well. Right up until the time that this person was mentioned, you had people, there was a lawsuit, and then someone else kind of blamed and put up someone's face on YouTube as well, and then took that off as well. There's this sort of race to break news, and often with that kind of style, you have quality that is lacking, quality in reporting and accuracy that is lacking. It's speed at the price of quality and accuracy. Do you remember at a certain point, I was bringing up this idea that you need to start narrowing down your investigation. You can't just keep sort of going further and further afield. So if you've decided that it's not anyone in the student fabric, and I've got to say, I started feeling that was the case. I thought, you know what I think is really ridiculous with the way true crime handled this was this idea of the 2 Jacks ended up being the obvious candidates, right? But if they were so obvious, this crime would have been solved about 35 days ago. It would have been solved within the first 3-4 days, right? Obviously, it wasn't obvious. Obviously, I think the perpetrator did clean up maybe he wore gloves and other things as well. But the issue that you kind of got to ask, if you're saying, well, at what point do you start narrowing down your focus, right? Well, if you think about the issue where you say, you know what, it doesn't look like the perpetrator is from this neighborhood. And I mean, if you think about that, just from the perspective of the vehicle coming into the neighborhood, the vehicle coming in into the neighborhood from via the food mart camera and then past Linda Lane, that's how I understand it, suggests that he was coming from out of town, or he's coming from not the student fabric, right? As soon as you took that line, you are immediately widening your gaze. So you're saying, well, it could be someone from a different town, but you are also narrowing your investigation in a way as well. So in other words, if you are searching forever through the University of Idaho students, one by one, going through all of them, and you're not getting anywhere, then by widening your gaze, that in a way is narrowing it, if you know what I'm saying. In other words, if you've gone through the entire student fabric and the entire town of Moscow, and you can't find an Elantra there, well, then narrowing your search like that's not going to work. So in other words, by widening your search to, say, Washington Pullman, which is something we did occasionally, we sort of looked at, there's an incident of a security guard there, right? By widening your gaze, that can then also allow you to narrow it from that point onwards. The idea isn't that you just go narrow, okay, that didn't work, well, now let's just go wider and wider. And so obviously what happened was law enforcement did widen their gaze and then narrow it down to a particular individual at the neighboring university. Again, the question comes up, was he brought into the fabric by that football game that night, or was he brought into the fabric by numerous parties on previous occasions, or both? It's kind of quite an interesting question. What do you guys think is the answer? What does Dave say? Deborah, I was actually of the opinion that the vehicle was going to the student area. So from, in terms of the food mart footage, it was coming from sort of the, what is it, east side of town, along the highway, and then turning off onto, can't quite remember the name of the, what is it? Is it Spiter? Can't quite remember the name of that street. See if I can bring it up. So if we go to the map and we just, let's take it out of there. Yeah, so it looked like he was driving this way into Steiner Avenue. That we don't know that for sure. We don't actually know for sure whether he was going that way or this way. We don't know that for sure. Let's just have a quick look at Pullman, the route he would take to Pullman. Let's take that out. So this is a little bit counterintuitive, I must say. If the perpetrator was coming from Pullman, then I don't know if you would have expected him to come in from this side. So it's possible that he was spending the night somewhere here. Maybe he was staying with friends or something, but the way that this vehicle should have come in would have been over here, this route. Do you guys see that? And the CCTV seems to capture the vehicle coming this way. That's how I understood it. So one does wonder if he was coming from here, what was that all about? Does that make sense? Can you see how that's a little bit counterintuitive? Is that the vehicle was, I think, approaching from the east, not from the west. And that definitely makes it quite confusing. Someone says he was following girls on Instagram. Well, that would make sense. His Instagram is set to private. A guy called Christopher sent me this statement from, or this quote from Nietzsche. And it's so true. It's this idea that we've got someone studying crimes, right? And it looks like he got consumed by the darkness. And so Nietzsche wrote, "Battle not with monsters, lest ye become a monster. And if you gaze into the abyss gazes also into you." Doesn't it feel like the abyss gazed into Brian's heart or mind, where he was studying monsters and criminals, and then he eventually became one? And one does wonder, some of us who obsess over these crimes and criminals, does any of that rub off? And I can tell you, when I was covering the Chris Watts case, actually, I'm not going to really reveal what I wanted to say there, but there are some people in true crime who actually seem to be inspired by the criminal psychology that actually comes out of true crime. I've seen it a couple of times. Like, on the one hand, you feel like we're the good guys. I certainly feel like this channel is the good guys. Then every now and then you come across someone in your community who applies the gaslighting and all that stuff in a way that's shocking. And you realize, I don't know, it's instead of being like teaching us what to expect from criminals, you're actually seeing it in your fellow man. It's pretty shocking. Pretty shocking. That does seem to be, yeah. I also think that he drove. That was his big mistake. That was definitely his big mistake, driving to the crime scene. So let's have a look at some of the reporting on this. This is from the Daily Beast. And that is also where I got this image from. It's from the Daily Beast. I think it's asking me to log in. Okay. So let's bring this up. This is, as I said, from the Daily Beast. Police finally made a move on Friday, arresting a 28-year-old criminology student who studied just miles from the off-campus residence, right? Now, the fact that he's 28 years old, I think that's come as a surprise to everybody. I mean, this guy is probably old enough to start thinking about getting married, right? And you would imagine having quite serious relationships sort of at this point, maybe not. And so one does wonder whether him being of that age made him more susceptible to the immaturity of kids partying. Does that maybe make sense? So you almost imagine if this guy Brian was a younger guy, that he would just be having fun like everybody else. Don't you get the idea that he was older, and so he was more likely to be more serious? Don't you get that idea? So it says here he was nabbed in his hometown of Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, and ordered to return to court for extradition hearing on Tuesday. So that's actually where he's from, Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. The other thing that I think you've got to think about is, you guys will probably know more about this than I do, you guys from America. If you're from Pennsylvania, does it mean you've got a particular view of life? Either way, I don't know. Does it mean that you might have a more conservative view of life in general, or radical? Would this person be more likely to have religious feelings or not? What do you guys think? Dave says it's a kind of a mix in Pennsylvania. Is the religiosity in Pennsylvania, do you think that could be a factor here? Is there a lot of hunting that goes on in Pennsylvania? I don't think it's anything like Idaho. That's interesting, mostly rural. Phil G says, I'm from Allentown. Okay. Yeah, like the Amish are from there. Not sure where that takes us. Yeah. Laurie says lots of hunting. And like lots of farms, right? Let's have a look at Albrightsville. Just get an idea. I mean, this is where he's from. Let's just get an idea what it looks like. Just have a look. So unincorporated community. What? Population 138. Is that tiny? It is drained by Mud Run westward into that river. It's a really, really small town place. Very, very few people there. There's like nothing to say about it over here. And it's northeastern Pennsylvania. Let's look at northeastern Pennsylvania. Well, the Endless Mountains, quite a nice name. Pocono Mountains. Unlike most parts of the Rust Belt, some of these communities are experiencing a modest population increase. Pocono Highway, NASCAR, skiing, Houdini Museum, five Catholic high schools. So one wonders where he went to high school there. Interesting. Golden Girl says it's a beautiful place. So do you guys agree that there's a high likelihood, because of what this guy studied, that the crime scene was cleaned up, that there was a certain amount of care in dealing with evidence that he thought he was leaving behind, right? Funny enough, that's exactly the topic that I covered in the very last video, dealing with the intertextualities of the Amanda Knox case. The whole, and so you've got to think about the killer wasn't only in the bedrooms, but he must have gone into the bathroom as well. Okay, so let's go back to this article. Fry declined to release further details, including a potential motive. So what do you guys think is the motive here? So we've already spoken about, now we've got a face, we've got a name, we've got his age, we've got a little bit about him. He comes from a very small town from far away. Do you, I mean, I'm not a girl, not that that's necessary these days, but do you guys think that he's a good-looking guy? Do you think Kaylee or Maddie found him attractive? He's got seems like he has a slightly broken nose, doesn't he? Do you agree that he is kind of odd looking and is possibly a bit of an awkward person, maybe socially awkward? Well, you know, because we know, or it looks like that he's suspected of committing a crime. It's easy to say is extremely unattractive, but he looks quite well groomed. I mean, he's shaved. He's got quite a neat appearance. The question is, what did the girls think about this guy? And I think a good way to compare it is you compare this guy, for example, to Jack. Compare this guy to Jake. How does he compare in that sense? And I think in that sense, in a way, these girls were fairly immature, but also rapidly becoming gaining social and sexual agency. And so I think the question comes up, in that transition where they were gaining sexual agency, was he one of the candidates that sort of passed, how can I put it, that passed by, that they passed by on the way to getting where they needed to go? To put it in a very blunt and inappropriate way, was he one of the 7 dwarfs on the way to finding Prince Charming, right? And is that what they sort of discovered? Charlotte says not bad. Okay. Yeah, he does look a bit different. Do you remember one of the first videos I made? In fact, I think it was the first one. I said, who's the odd one out, right? Do you think he fits that profile as somewhat of an oddball? If he went to the party, would he have been the odd one out there? Would he have been one of the oldest guys at the party, 28 years old? Thanks, Bina. Thanks a lot for that. It's quite interesting. That is quite an interesting point. Bear in mind that the girls were reaching the end of their studies, so they probably thought of themselves as sort of the top of the pile of the undergraduates, I guess. You know what I mean? True, he may sound charming if you hear him speak. Okay. Cops have not yet found the murder weapon. They did seize a white Hyundai Elantra. They don't say where, but one assumes it's in Pennsylvania. I mean, it may not be. Maybe they seized it somewhere else and then he went on the run. Now, if you think about this case, if you think about they may have known the identity of this guy, right? And I'm going to say this in a really dumb way. Do you think they knew who this guy was before today? Do you think they knew who this guy was a week ago, right? And so if they did, why not do something like happened in the Caitlin Armstrong case? Why not say, or even the Vicky White case? Why not say, or even the Brian Laundrie case? We've identified someone, his name's Brian Koberger, and we're looking for him in connection with this quadruple murder. What do you think would have happened if law enforcement did that? Let me say that again. So first of all, you say, do you think law enforcement knew about this particular individual before today or before yesterday? And you say, yes. Then you say, why wouldn't law enforcement not just say to the public, guys, we think we've found somebody and this is who he is, but we don't know where he is. His name's Brian Koberger, and ... What do you think would have happened? Why do you think they didn't do that? So that's a good answer. He could have gone into hiding. I don't know if that was their concern so much. They were gaining evidence, so they were still probably in the process of getting the DNA. So they probably thought, we think it's this guy, but we need to. Have you noticed he's not being offered bond? That means they've got serious evidence against him, just like Richard Allen. Yeah, that is, to me, the bottom line is because this case was so high profile. If they had put out a all points bulletin, you probably would have had a situation where social media basically try to sort of form a posse and try to actually find this guy themselves, and could have been a very dangerous situation for everybody, right? Also, by identifying this guy on the run, you could have a situation where someone tries to apprehend him, not law enforcement, and that then leads to a close encounter. So it was really for everybody's protection, the protection of the case, the protection of the perpetrator. And you actually see him is actually wearing, looks like body armor or something in this image. Where is that image? Kind of looks like he's wearing body armor in this image, doesn't it? Like a bulletproof vest. You can really imagine that if they had given this guy's identity, that his life would have been on the line, right? And you might say that is that's the kind of justice social media wanted and true crime wanted. It's not the way justice needs to operate in America, right? Because there was this rabid thing going on up until the very last day, where people were examining the footage of the inside of the Corner Club, right? If they were going after Jack in that way, can you imagine how they would have been going after this guy? And that would have been a, what do you call it? It would affect his rights. He would be able to bring this up at trial, that his rights were infringed by the law enforcement, basically infringing on his rights. You guys agree with that? Wendy from Pennsylvania, good to have you here. So let's just want to see what Sharon says. Well, I'm going to go all the way up to your comment. Thanks a lot, Sharon. Okay. But anyway, there's that face. For how long we've gone almost 50 days without knowing for sure what the face was, and now we've got this face. And when you bring it up, let me put it up full size, you do wonder what has haunted this person. What happened in his childhood? What happened with previous girlfriends? Why did he decide to study criminal psychology? What did he study? So here it says, Koberger allegedly posted this on Reddit in May. He posted this earlier this year. My name is Brian. I'm inviting you to participate in a research project that seeks to understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime. In particular, this study seeks to understand the story behind your most recent criminal offense. So it seems like he wants criminals to be part of his research thing. Student investigator Brian Koberger. So if you think about it, is committing a crime easy, right? Yeah, you've got a guy who's virtually a doctor in the study of criminology, right? He's almost got his doctorate in criminology, and he commits a crime. He got away with it for about 49 days. It's not easy committing a crime. It's a lot easier, you may not think so, but it's a lot easier investigating and catching a killer than committing a crime and getting away with it. Does look like a bit of a smirk. Okay, what else can I share with you guys? So this is going to be my okay, sorry about that. So this is how we found out today what is gonna be. I've got so many windows open here. What is going to be in the news? That was, I think, the first thing that came on our radar. Breaking: independent sources have confirmed to Nonstop Local that an arrest has been made. Just before that, we heard on Reddit. We saw this on Reddit. Huge press conference today. I got a call at 10:56 last night, and it has been hard to fall back asleep. So that turned out to be credible. And then later today, in fact, I think this should be happening right now. Celebration of life for Maddie and Kaylee. I wonder if there's a live stream to that. If there is, Terry, will you let me know? I must say, when I was covering this, this really brought home to me the reality that these are real people and what has really happened here. Just this picture of Maddie's boots And 1 minute her boots were there, and then they were taken out of the window. And then seeing this picture of Maddie wearing the boots. And then the next thing they removed. Just that little bit of information, kind of an incidental bit of information about Maddie, just made her very human to me, and just makes the reality of this so ghastly, doesn't it? Titanic discussions, thanks for that. I'm from this part of Pennsylvania. Let me assure everyone in the world, our prison guards don't like guys like this. Can you tell us about rural folk in Pennsylvania? Are they people who hunt and have barbecues and, is there anything worth saying about folks in general in Pennsylvania? Is there a, I mean, doesn't it feel like there is a kind of conservative religious component to Pennsylvania? I mean, the Amish, but does it extend beyond that? And one does wonder, was this crime committed because someone out of a love thing, because someone had feelings of unrequited love, or was it because someone disapproved of gratuitous, debaucherous behavior the way they saw it? That, I must say, I find the latter hard to think about, but who knows? Who knows? I mean, if the killer had some kind of romantic issue, why kill 4 people? Why not just 1 or 2? That's been the question all along. Okay. So yeah, this is going to be my next episode, 22,000 tips and no suspect. And then I was going to cover this, and then the power went out, and so I just changed it to that. But it did seem kind of unlikely. I mean, I was going to do this and say, are we really expected to believe that there have been 20,000 tips and there's no suspect? And it turns out, obviously, there was. So I want to go back to what Tracy Walder says, that she wasn't surprised that it was someone from far away. Let me see if I can just find that story again. CBS, I think. Because that's ABC. Let's play ABC first.
This morning, new video surfacing of one of the Idaho murder victims as police track down new leads in the killings.
Hello, miss. Hello. What's your name?
Xana. The video, first obtained by the website Truth and Transparency, showing Xana Kernodle opening the door of the King Street home as officers approach.
We can hear you from clear down the road when we were coming up here. We can hear the music, and that's... I'm so sorry.
The video from officer-worn body cameras over Labor Day weekend at nearly 1 in the morning. Officers saying it's the second time they've been to the residence that night.
Any outside music, any loud yelling needs to be done. Okay. Because we're not, next time you're getting a ticket.
Okay. Police telling us this was a common occurrence in the normally bustling college town.
Calls do your officers normally respond to?
You know, a lot of noise complaints. Neighbors are being kept up.
Now, 7 weeks.
So you remember one of the last things that we were sort of talking about before this announcement was, could it be possible that the same way that the officers were treated in a somewhat dismissive way, in a somewhat not really taking responsibility way, isn't it possible that Brian was treated the same way, where they kind of just decided as a household, we don't really want Brian here anymore. You know, Brian freaked us out with this or with that. And so they just don't really want to deal with it anymore. And did that really agitate Brian, right? And did that lead to Brian becoming the stalker? Was Brian the stalker in this story?
Weeks after Xana, her boyfriend Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Gonsalves, and Madison Mogan were found brutally stabbed to death, the home is still an active crime scene. Today, authorities say biohazard teams will begin the initial cleanup process of the 6-bedroom popular off-campus home.
So we did hear that the biohazard team was actually stopped, that the court actually stopped them. And one wonders what that's about. You would almost assume that the biohazard team was sent in because law enforcement felt, well, we've got what we need, but the court has actually stopped that process. So it kind of makes you wonder, is that maybe what a defense attorney wants to go and have a look at? So if you think about it, you guys remember the Chris Watts case? When Chris Watts was still going to be defended, his defense team wanted to go to the house to find whatever they could find to exonerate him. You could have a similar situation here where Brian is lawyered up and his lawyer wants access to the crime scene as is before it's cleaned up so that they can find whatever, disputed DNA, whatever. And, you know, in the Amanda Knox case, they found a bra clasp, I don't know what it was, 19 days or something, under a mattress. And although it was vital evidence, it ended up merely showing that the police had botched that investigation. You could have the same thing over here. You could have a situation where the cops really have their work cut out for them, dealing with a perpetrator who has studied what he has studied, criminology. Could definitely be a tough nut to crack. I don't think so. I think the DNA and the car and the dynamics that are going to emerge, I think that has been quite clear, but I guess we'll see.
For more than 2 months, the murders have rocked this community. And while questions swirl, the victims honored now by their loved ones. A celebration of life planned tonight for lifelong best friends Kaylee and Maddie. But as Kaylee's father told GMA last month, this fight is far from over.
You know, I'll fight for her, and I will help all these family members find some way to keep this story going.
So I do think we've got to sort of have a report card, and I actually wanted to do that in this episode in a bigger way than I'm going to actually be doing. But I think one's got to hold a report card and say, we now know who the perpetrator is, or it looks like we know who it is. How well did you do? How well did your channel do in figuring this out, right? You didn't have all the information. Law enforcement were keeping their cards close to their chest. But when law enforcement said that individual was cleared, did you accept that, or did you cheekily, mischievously, arrogantly continue to suspect that person? When certain evidence came to light, like the Elantra, did you think it was not really relevant, or did you treat it with the significance it deserved? Because in the end, the Elantra is what broke this case. Probably the CCTV and the DNA, right? But how well did we as a community figure that out? And how well did certain other channels do in that respect? How respectful was this channel in not revealing the names or the faces of certain suspects vis-a-vis other channels revealing names, faces, and their suspicions? Just a bit of a report card that you can do. Also, how good were you in keeping an open mind and maintaining the presumption of innocence with people, various people saying, I'm absolutely sure it's this person or that person. It's very important at this point to review ourselves and how we did based on what we knew and what we didn't know. And then also just accepting and acknowledging that the police know things, but they can't tell us. Prosecutors know things, but they can't tell us. That doesn't give us a license to do exactly what they don't allow themselves to do, which is make reckless, unsubstantiated statements. So the fact that they won't do that doesn't mean, okay, you guys can do that now. And the whole reason why that's there is to protect the legitimacy of the whole journey into the courtroom, so that when the person does get into court, they haven't already been found guilty in the court of public opinion. And if you think about it, there's been this attempt to find how many people guilty in the court of public opinion. That's why I don't always want to try and find the specific person. I want to find the psychology that's going on. That's the safe space where you can say, it looks like the motive is this. It looks like via going to that case, it looks like we're dealing with this situation, right? Whereas a lot of channels fixate on it's either that person or that person or that person. And as soon as you do that, you're naming names, destroying lives. And so I hope when we go into the next case, we're going to remember this. And it was so important. Yeah, someone says Professor Moriarty. It's so important when it's youngsters to try and protect their rights to privacy. Be careful in our conversations and our attempts to solve these cases. What did the perpetrator cover? Well, it could have been belonging to the funhouse setup, but it may also have been that he was in love with one of the girls there. To be honest, my first thought when I saw the case, and I didn't really want to say it, and I didn't say it for a while, but my first thought was that I thought the target was Maddie. I thought that the perpetrator noticed her and may have fallen for her. Also based on how Maddie was getting Hoodie Guy's attention and that sort of thing. So he may have coveted Maddie, but in the sense of he had feelings towards her. Infatuation, but desperate infatuation, the kind of infatuation where if you've been alone and single for a long time and maybe someone has shown a little bit of interest in you, that kind of thing. Okay, so I want to play that thing from CBS, if I can find it. What have I done with it? It's not there. It's not there. Okay, let me see if I can find that link. Sorry about that. Give me a moment. CBS, where are you? I just want to play what Tracy Walder said, or has it been removed now? I think it's been removed. That's a pity.
Thank you, Prosecutor.
Yeah, they've removed that, what was originally there. Okay. So this is from the Daily Mail, and yeah, they talk about DNA found at the crime scene. Arrest comes after officers traced White Hyundai to his Pennsylvania address and cross-matched his DNA found at the scene of the quadruple slaying. Now the question comes up, cross-matched to what? Did they cross-match it to a kind of genealogical test? The other thing that I think is quite interesting is, did they literally find him by tracing the registration of his vehicle to his home address? Was it that simple? Let me say that again. Did they find this guy through nothing more, through no more elaborate police work than that they simply found his vehicle, then they did like a trace to where he lived, and then they kept that kind of in hand, and then they bided, can you say bided their time, until the DNA results came back, which would have taken about 6 weeks, right? Which is about where we are now. Once the DNA results came back and it was a bingo, they said, okay, we need to get the guy, and that's where he is, and that's how simple it was to catch him. Doesn't that appear to be exactly what happened? Susan says registered to father. That's interesting. It does make you also wonder, how much money did he have? What sort of income did he have? And did he sort of want to be part of this funhouse situation, and then felt like when he was on the outs, he felt jealous, and there was a sort of incel aspect to it, where he felt jealous and he felt angry at how spoiled these kids were, and that they were kind of shallowly, superficially rejecting him, and that made him feel very angry. In other words, did he feel kind of in other words, not just because you don't like me, I like you, you don't like me. It wasn't just that. Did he feel something that was beyond that? Something that was where he felt discriminated against based on, or he discriminated against them based on their privilege or their maybe how entitled they seem to feel. Maybe the entitlement that made him angry was the entitlement that he thought he saw. Maybe it was that. I mean, think about, I don't know if he was more interested in Kaylee or Maddie, or if it was something else, but if it was Kaylee was about to go backpacking in America, Europe, right? And then she was going to go and work in Texas. Now, if you think about this guy, if he's driving around his parents' old Elantra, it makes you wonder, did he have much money? Did he have much fun? Did he have much opportunity to enjoy himself? And then when he did, was that sort of snatched away? And is that what this is all about? Griping over a sort of fun setup that he was once part of and then not part of and couldn't get over it. Is that what this is all about? Yeah, and I mean, if it's his parents' Elantra, it's even worse, if that's true. It could be, could definitely be. So, well, that's something else, okay. I think to me, the really obvious thing that sticks out with him is not that young. 28 years old is almost 30. I mean, I was at university for a heck of a long time, but I wasn't even really at university at 28. I was already overseas. So yeah, 28 is definitely quite old to be at university. And you can almost imagine if he was at the party, what would other guys say about this old dude hanging around? You know, it's like, are you even a student? You know what I mean? It is normal for a PhD, but can you imagine? I mean, it's a 20-year-old with a 20 or 21-year-old with a 28-year-old. It's not that strange, but I mean, if you had to compare this person to Jake or to Jack, you can see there's a big difference. Tracy, welcome. Yeah, that's the question. Wasn't he too old for the party house? And it may not even have been Kaylee or Maddie who thought so. Maybe the other girls started feeling, well, I'm 20, this guy's almost 30. What's he doing here? He's not even from our university, right? I mean, I don't think you can get away from the sense that it's an oddball, that he looks like an oddball. And the oddball thing is reinforced by what was he doing at this university? He's from a different university. What was he doing there? Also, he's older. What are you coming all the way to this university for, to be with these younger people? Cookie Cat says maybe they found the car, took DNA, but matched a profile from the scene that they had a match to. I think you're saying, could they have gotten a DNA from the vehicle? It's possible that they may also have gotten DNA from him directly. They may have either asked him for a DNA sample or, but that is definitely quite an interesting question. They got the DNA at the scene. How did they match that DNA to him? It could be through, and I'm not an expert on this, but it could be something like genealogical testing, which not quite sure how it works, but it's an indirect way of finding someone that may not be in a database. Let me just see if I can get some information on that, because I've seen it so many times. How accurate is genealogical DNA testing? It gives a list of DNA cousins, and the results are more reliable. Yeah, I'm not all that sure how all of that works. Okay, so let's have a look at what's in the news right now. So this is from Fox News. Idaho murder suspect Brian Koberger arrested. He was taken into custody at 1:30 a.m. Well, that's interesting. So pretty obviously a surprise, a kind of bust. On a warrant charging him with 4 counts of murder and burglary. He was studying criminal justice. In other words, he was a law student. He was studying the law. I studied criminal law. Well, that was one of the subjects I had, yeah. The suspect is a graduate student, 15 minutes drive from the funhouse. There we go. So the Elantra was removed from the home where the suspect was arrested. So he literally appeared to have committed the crime, drove home, really long distance, and then they simply traced the vehicle to his home, and that's where they found him. And they got him at about 1:30 in the morning. That's it. ABC reports that a SWAT team descended on the property, which is near several ski resorts and the Pocono Raceway. So the whole ski resort thing, I guess, gives you an idea that he's quite an outdoors dude. Maybe he skied as well. Investigators focused on tracking a 2011 to 2013 Elantra that was spotted near the home. That's what gave him away. I suppose if it is his parents' car, I don't know if that's true, but if it is his parents' car, he thought that's going to be a potential cover for him, plus the fact that he probably didn't think they were going to see the car. Or if they did see the car, that wasn't going to give him away. Who knows? Another question that sort of comes up is these surviving roommates, did they say anything about him? Did they kind of do a Jodi Arias? Did they sort of say, you need to look at that guy? One just wonders about that. Did they sort of say, you know what, there were a couple of guys that were annoying or creepy or whatever. This is one of them. Who knows? But, you know, if you take this whole idea of, and this is what I think a lot of us said from the beginning, the killer is a student because he was moving around at hours that students would, and he was familiar with the inside of the house, and he was familiar with the habits of these students. And so that turned to be absolutely right. You know, it wasn't a serial killer. It wasn't a random person. It was actually someone within the student fabric, but not within the student fabric. It was somebody who did know the students' patterns of behavior. And you would imagine someone studying criminology would be particularly alert to that whole idea. What are these patterns of behavior? And they were, what time do these kids go to bed? And when would they most likely be the most drunk? Well, wouldn't it be a Sunday morning? When would they be the most vulnerable? Or wouldn't it be a Sunday morning? Would it be a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning? But would definitely be over a weekend. Would it be they tend to be more passed out after a football game or an average party in the week? Football game, right? If he wanted to commit the crime and implicate someone else, then maybe he also chose that weekend because of the football game. It's hard to know whether he thought it out that far. And now think about that old statement, was this attack targeted? Seems so, doesn't it? So Ethan Chapin was studying recreation, sport, and tourism management. Would that lead him to brush shoulders with a perpetrator? You wouldn't really think so, would you? Zana was a junior majoring in marketing. So you wouldn't think that she would really brush against, she wouldn't really ordinarily meet up with, I mean, if one of these kids was studying law, you would imagine that would, maybe the kids studying law at the one university might encounter other kids, but that's not what happened here. So it must be through the party setting. But then you've also got to ask, how was he initially introduced? Wasn't it through social media? Okay, so that's one story. What else has come out? This one from CNN, I think we've already touched on it. Kohlberger's DNA has been matched to genetic material recovered at the off-campus house. So that was something else that I think we were right about as well. We said he very likely did leave his DNA at the scene. Now we know that for sure. It would be interesting to know, how did they get his DNA, possibly through a warrant. But I mean, another way could be if they went to his home, his apartment, and tested DNA from there. I suppose they could have done that as well. Because it does say here, if you have a look, it says, authorities learned the suspect had left the area and went to Pennsylvania. An FBI surveillance team from Philadelphia field office had been tracking him for 4 days. Okay. So they're tracking him for at least 4 days before his arrest. That's also news to us. So you've kind of got to think about the police chief being asked to sort of respond to the corner club footage. Can you verify this? Can you whatever? And he had to have known at that point that that's got nothing to do with the crime, that particular screen grab. But he could actually have verified it or whatever. And instead, he's kind of putting this character, is putting Brian Kohlberger in a state of uncertainty. You know, in other words, do the police suspect Jack? Well, if Brian thinks that, and maybe he hopes that, then that might make him lazy, or what's the word? Not on his guard. And I mean, you could have had a situation where he could have fled the country. It could have been another Caitlin Armstrong situation, which ended up not being, right? Okay, let's, I think I'm going to sort of wrap up now. Let's deal with a couple of your questions and comments, and then we'll head off. So yeah, this does seem to be a DNA case, but it's not DNA in isolation. DNA plus the vehicle. Sokoi Cat says, I'd date him if he wasn't crazy. Interesting. Yeah, so that is an interesting question. Are his hands injured? Of course, you can't see that in this image, but one does wonder. Another thing you've got to wonder about is if he went home to his parents, did his parents just not watch television? Or his parents not the kind of folks who read the news? Did he kind of reasonably expect the people around him not to pay attention to the news? Makes you wonder. Pharaoh says the video made by the victims has been erased. So I don't know if I'm saying this prematurely. We've still got to have a trial, and I actually think this is going to be the most anticipated trial in a long time. Might even eclipse the Laurie Vallow case, or who knows when it's going to take place. But I think what may come out of this case is, I could be wrong. I'm just speculating. It could be that social media can attract the wolves to your door, right? This case could be a a red flag case for young people. Don't willy-nilly put pictures, sexy pictures of yourselves on social media. And you might say, don't, that is nonsense. It's the killer's fault for doing whatever. All I'm saying is it's possible that social media that is accessible to all can bring the wolves to your door. And so maybe the lesson from this case, you guys agree, maybe I'm wrong, isn't the lesson from this case that, including for students, including if you're saying, guys, let's have fun, let's have parties, let's whatever, set your accounts to private. Be accessible, but to your own kind of close community. That's not a guarantee that something's not going to happen, but it's definitely a layer of protection. Do you agree that the one way that these victims may have made themselves vulnerable, besides the sort of lax security of the house itself, was the social media that was so open and available? Yeah, well said. So I think one's going to talk about, like, I don't really want to be the the person saying police what you put online, more just police how you put it online. So you can put it online, but put it within a private, set your Instagram to private. And nobody really wants to do that because the point of social media is to be, this is what's going on. But I'm just saying maybe that is going to be the takeout from this particular thing. In the Caitlin Armstrong case, the issue came up that it looked like, I think it's the prosecution's case, it looks like the victim gave away where she was by putting a workout or something on Strava. So she may have gone for a run or a ride or whatever it was. She put that up on Strava, which is a fitness app, which shows maps of your workouts and so on. And it looks like the killer in that case saw that the victim was in town, number one, on the Instagram, then went to the Strava, saw where she was in town, and then killed her. And so I'm just saying, social media, be careful. You can add a layer of security to that as well. That might be the lesson from this case. So if you've got kids, if you're a mother watching this, you might want to apply this to your kids or to their future social media. Reagan says, I don't think he intended to get away with anything. Really? Yeah, that's a start. You can start by doing that. I do think he knew about everyone inside that house, because I think he'd been inside the house. How did he think he could get away with it considering his criminal education? It's a good question. I think first of all, I think you've got to acknowledge that he did get away with it for about 40 days, 50 days. He also got away with, he didn't actually wake up the surviving roommates, which is incredible in itself. I think, this is my opinion, I think he went there and he anticipated committing the crime in a certain way. and didn't anticipate cutting himself, which I think he did. I think I've written, I've studied true crime for 10 years. You might say a doctor of criminal law would know more than me, and I would say, actually, you don't. Because you've maybe studied the law, but I don't know if you studied actual cases, one after the other, and gotten that intertextual education the way that I have and the way that we have, right? And in that sense, I think he thought he was very clever, but he didn't think, for example, of what happened in the Jodi Arias case. You need to, I mean, you may know the Jodi Arias case very well, but how well do you know it to know that she cut her finger, right? You know that well. And that applies to other cases as well. In the Meredith Kircher case, did someone have cuts or scratches? In the Suzanne Morphew case, did someone have scratches as well? He may have known a lot, but I would wager that he didn't know it that well. So that's in terms of the injuring yourself while committing the crime aspect and the DNA aspect. So I think he underestimated that. And then I think, and this part's really easy to underestimate, I think he underestimated his ability to drive there and leave without being seen. I mean, who would imagine a camera on Linda Lane at the top, in an apartment at the top, would capture anything? Who would imagine a camera, that there was a camera at the food mart, right? And so I think another way to protect oneself, one of the things they need to do at 1122 King Road is install a camera on that house, and neighboring houses as well. Another thing that he anticipated was that there was no light under that front door, right? So I think that was the one side of it. The other side, I think he thought in a very general sense, I'm not even from this town. They're going to be thinking the killer is one of the people here, and that's going to be my insurance, right? The other thing that I think he didn't anticipate was that this would be so high profile. I think a lot of killers think, I'm going to commit this crime, no one's going to know, and then I can just go back to my life. I mean, what did this killer think? That he was going to commit the crime and then just continue studying, and did he really think that was going to happen? The thing is, there are so many crimes in America, and only one here and one there becomes high profile. Of course, if you are, for example, the Delphi killer, if you are unlucky enough for your case to become high profile, the chances are you're going to get caught. But how do you know that's going to happen? Jessica says, I've just given my kids devices, and my husband and I have been doing extensive education online and implemented serious parental controls and no social media. I'm so glad I made it here to hear you hypothesize the way you do. Thanks a lot, Jessica. And if this episode keeps your kids safer, then that's a good thing. That's a good start. You must remember, social media is almost like leaving your front door open or your front door unlocked. It's a way that allows a stranger into somebody's life, right? And they can get all sorts of personal things from them. So be careful with social media. Be careful with your social media. I don't know if you guys are aware, I'm actually quite careful with mine. If you go into my Instagram, my Twitter, you won't find too many selfies. I am definitely quite careful with my social media. Jen George says, what links between him and the victims? We mentioned this earlier, but he is a student. So it is likely that he had encountered them before, or they had encountered him. It is likely that he probably attended at least one of those parties, that he'd been in that house. But I think there's also a likelihood that he wasn't really allowed back in the house after that. Either he wasn't allowed, or he, for whatever reason, was no longer part of the whole thing. Maybe he had an encounter with one of them. Maybe he was told it's over, whatever it was. Okay, let's go through a couple last questions. That's true. Is that right? He graduated in May. He graduated WSU. I actually wanted to share his profile with you on the university website, but it's either been removed or the link has changed. CBTV, cool. Yeah, I think what you really want to look at is whether, I mean, if he did follow them on Instagram, he's probably taken himself off, right? But that does make sense. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with the Delphi case. Did his parents have any idea? Did his fellow classmates have any idea? Okay, so he graduated in May. That's Christopher's opinion. He says, I don't think he was in the house. So if he wasn't in the house, then you've kind of got to ask, if it was targeted, how did he know not to target the survivors? Also, how did he commit the crime? How did he get in there if he wasn't in the house before? I don't think his family has money. Not sure why I've got a splitting headache. I never get headaches. So this is from the New York Times. And then I think I'm going to skedaddle. The suspect's arrest was the first major break in the case in November. Officials gave no details about the motive. They asked the public to come forward with any information about the suspect. How do you think we're going to get to the motive? So that's the next sort of step in a way. That's the next sort of unknown. You know, we didn't know who this was. Now we know who it was, right? It looks like we know. How do we get to the motive? Christopher says digital forensics and interrogation. Teresa says, I need a beverage. That's an interesting answer. From the order of the killing, that's definitely an interesting answer. Yeah, I mean, one way of getting the motive is who did he directly target? Jay Jam says there is none. It's possible, but I think there is one. What is he covered is the motive. Yes, to some extent. So how you get to the motive is simple. It's a simple thing, but it's not easy. So you get to the motive through who. So by finding out who this guy is, what is his background, right? So we already know where he grew up, small town, whatever. But it's quite likely the oddball, lonely scenario, as he had lots of girlfriends, whatever. But basically, the who is going to give you the why, right? And the hardest part within the who, there's certain aspects to the who that's fairly easy to get to. So who, how did he see himself? How old was he? By the way, I've seen a Instagram account of his that I don't think is actually legitimate, but the fact that he was studying criminals, I think already tells you that, and then he commits a crime, already tells you that there is something sly and creepy about this character, that somewhere along the line he gave up on the good fight, right? That he is a bit of a hypocrite in a way, that must be a bit of a loser. But that's the one side of it, the who. The other side is the dynamics that link him to other people, the dynamics in his past that didn't work out, and then the dynamics in this particular scenario that didn't work out as well. So the motive, you're going to get a motive that is in a way broad, that he comes from a particular background that made what happened here absolutely inevitable, right? In a general sense. And then within the dynamics that he was in, maybe he was reaching the end of his studies, and everywhere around him, people were hooking up and getting married and getting engaged and whatever. And he wanted to be one of those people. And I don't know. So the dynamics is simple. That's where you're going to find your answer. But it's very, very complicated and very, very, it's not easy to find that answer. And that's why they're asking for the public to answer that question. The roommates could probably provide some of the answers. What other people saw and other people experienced with him would indicate what the dynamics were, right? So that's how you get to the motive. Who was someone and what were their dynamics, their relationship dynamics with various people? How were they dysfunctional? How were they not working out? How do you predict how he will plead? I've got an idea he's going to plead not guilty, because apparently he said when they arrested him, has someone else been arrested as well, or something like that. Doesn't seem like drugs were involved. That's a difficult one. One of my recent videos, the title was something like, did sleep deprivation have anything to do with this? I think it may have. I think sleep deprivation may have addled his thinking. Alcohol may have been a factor. It's hard to say. I wouldn't say that drugs aren't a factor whatsoever. They may be peripheral, might be peripheral. I do think I do need to drink some more water, that's for sure. That's good to hear. Thanks for letting me know that, CK. Thanks for letting me know. How do I? Okay. So I think on that sour note, I'm gonna skedaddle. Yeah, I haven't done many lives, and I wasn't really going to do one, but this did seem to require coming on. Ann Smith, thanks very much. Okay, so yeah, I mean the main thing I really wanted to reiterate in this live is, you see how important the Scout mindset is, where all along there were these suspicions, right? And did it turn out to be anyone that we thought it might be, right? So it's important for us as the true crime community to keep an open mind, and also to respect law enforcement that they may know something that we don't. And there's this tendency from social media to arrogantly think they don't know anything, otherwise they would say something. No, they're legally prescribed not to. And the other side of it is, as you've heard, if they say something, it tips the killer off. So why do you want to give him that advantage? That's exactly what's happened here. So I'm glad I did get a chance to go for a quick swim before this live. And good to see you all. What did you say? I did sway, but my gut at the start said a stranger. Okay. Thank you, Stephanie, for being here as well. Thanks a lot, mods, for keeping me in the loop. SM Kovalinsky as well for sending through a lot of information. Obviously, I'm going to be continuing coverage of this case, specifically trying to figure out the who and the motive, and then also so the who and the why. And then also we're going to be looking at that probable cause affidavit. That should be coming out, I don't know, maybe in the next week or so. So we'll look out for that. I also just want us to think about the victims. When you see the perpetrator, so this is also something I wanted to bring to your attention. Seems like the news media knew this was going to come out a while ago. This is going to come out today. So one wonders what that body cam footage is, caught on video, and then says, finally solved, our killer was found after 49 days. Families demand to know motive. He didn't act alone. What's that all about? So, yeah, but I mean, the thing that we must bear in mind here are 4 people died. Why? And even when you find out why, it's probably not going to be a very good answer. I mean, probably if you could speak to the killer now and you said, are you glad you did what you did? Would you do it again? What do you think he would say? It is, they said it during the press conference, catching the killer doesn't bring back any of those 4 lives. It doesn't really bring any real satisfaction, does it? Those 4 lives are lost forever. Even if the killer is tried and he gets the appropriate sentence, those lives are still lost forever. And so the only, I think, positive thing we can take out of this is we look on, and we've got to, first of all, I think, learn how to deal with these cases appropriately as a mature true crime channel and a mature true crime community, that we are the good guys. That's the one side. But the other part is, how can we apply this to our own lives? What can we learn? What lessons can we learn from this? Besides being curious, and besides thinking critically, and besides following the evidence in the right way, how should we secure our social media, right? What lessons can we learn through this? And that's really what we want to look at. But, you know, at the end of the day, 4 young lives, they were about to go on to the rest. Kaylee was about to go to Europe. Maddie also about to go on with her life. You know, and her father said she got the life that she deserved. But her fairy tale, looking on at her fairy tale for the killer was like a nightmare for him. And so I don't know, we've got to think about our lives realistically, not fall into the same trap where you lust after someone else's fairy tale. Live your own life in a realistic way, take precautions, but also go and have that backpacking trip through Europe. Have some fun, have a fun party, but be careful. Make sure that you've got security and privacy in place. You know, enjoy yourself, but in a way that you're aware of certain things, I guess, is maybe a lesson here. It's a tough lesson to learn, to go to university to have fun, but you've kind of got to look over your shoulder to some extent, right? But that is life. You go on holiday, you've got to make sure you drive safely to get there. You know, that is life. You've got to, in the midst of the fairy tale, you've got to not be careless, right? Isn't that the lesson? Thanks a lot, Gary. So I just want to thank all the new subs, a lot new people that are here. Welcome. I hope you enjoying the content here, and I hope you're going to find a good place to listen to true crime, and there are really some wonderful mods and members and subscribers here. So I hope you feeling at home, and I hope you're feeling welcomed here. Thanks a lot, CBTV. Does a killer have a criminal record? I don't think so. Otherwise, he likely would have come up earlier. I don't think he does have a criminal record. Bria, we must have a chat. Good to have you joining us. It's about 1:20 in France, so you should, I think, maybe get some sleep. Yeah, I was actually, just before this came on, I was watching Robin Williams in the Dead Poets Society, Seize the Day. It's also about kids at school trying to navigate the whole thing and do it in a way that while you're in the middle of being institutionalized, you also find out who you are. But that can be a dangerous thing, because life is a risk. Life is definitely a risk. It is a great movie. So Happy New Year, everyone. I hope it's going to be a better year than the past year. That's basically my hope for my new year. It's just that it's going to be a better new year than the one that's been. Thanks a lot, China Rose. Thank you. Stargirl says no criminal record. A PI checked it. Yeah. Excellent movie. Yeah, I love when they all stand on the desks. Okay. Okay, guys, Scouts, Peaches, everyone, thanks a lot for joining me here. Sorry, I've been sort of AWOL for a while. I was just busy putting videos together. But yeah, I'll be back looking into the who and the why, and let's see what we can fathom. Thanks, everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you guys next time. All the best.